Kept my coat on the whole drive home. I don't know why, it wasn't cold in the car. My son-in-law had the heat running the whole time, the way he always does. Too warm, the kind of warm that makes you sleepy. But I sat in the back seat with my coat buttoned up to my chin, and I watched the streetlights go by and I didn't say a word. They didn't know I had heard them. That was the part I kept turning over in my mind. They had no idea. It had been my daughter's idea to have Thanksgiving at her place this year. She'd called me in October, cheerful the way she gets when she's already decided something and just needs me to agree. "Mom, it'll be so much easier. You don't have to cook anything, just bring yourself." I said that sounded fine, I meant it too. I was 68 years old and I had hosted Thanksgiving for 31 years straight, and the idea of sitting down at someone else's table and letting someone else worry about the turkey honestly sounded like a gift. So I brought a pie, sweet potato from scratch, the way my mother taught me, with the brown sugar and a little nutmeg and the crust pressed by hand. I drove the 40 minutes to their house in Glendale with the pie on the passenger seat and the radio on low, and I remember this clearly, I felt light, content, the way you feel when you think you are wanted somewhere. My daughter Renata met me at the door. She hugged me, took the pie, said it smelled wonderful. My son-in-law, whose name is Scott, shook my hand the way he always does. That half-present handshake, his eyes already drifting back toward the game on TV. Their daughter was there too, my granddaughter, 17 and already taller than me, and she hugged me hard and said, "Grandma, I missed you." And that alone made the drive worth it. The house was full. Renata's brother and his wife had come down from Portland, friends of Scott's. I'd met maybe twice. A neighbor couple who brought wine and seemed to know everyone except me. I found a chair in the living room, and I sat and I smiled and I answered the same 3 questions people ask when they don't know what else to say. Yes, still in the same house. No, not working anymore, retired 2 years now. It's an adjustment, you know how it is. It was around 4 o'clock when I slipped into the kitchen to get a glass of water. The kitchen and the small hallway behind it connect to the sunroom, and Renata had set up the kids' table there, though there were no kids using it yet. I wasn't looking for anything, wasn't trying to listen. I just needed a moment away from the noise, and the kitchen was quiet. Or, I thought it was. I heard Renata's voice first. She was standing in the sunroom doorway, talking to her brother, and I could hear her clearly through the pass-through above the counter. "She just sits there," Renata was saying, "like we're supposed to entertain her the whole time." I stopped. I had my hand on the faucet. I did not turn it on. "Mom's always been like that," her brother said. He was not unkind about it, just matter of fact, the way you describe weather. "She doesn't really mix." "It's exhausting," Renata said. "Every gathering." Scott said, last year, that she made the whole room uncomfortable. I didn't want to say anything, but I kind of agree. So why invite her? There was a pause, a small, terrible pause. "She's my mother, Daniel. I can't not invite her." And then something worse, something I will never forget as long as I live. Scott said if we just invite her to the evening part next time, she won't feel the need to stay as long. I stood in that kitchen for I don't know how many minutes. I could hear the TV in the living room. I could hear my granddaughter laughing at something. I could hear the timer on the oven counting down, patient and steady, indifferent to what had just happened to me. I made myself move eventually. I filled the glass. I walked back to the living room. I sat down in my chair and I smiled at whoever was nearest, and I stayed for another 2 hours, and I ate turkey and sweet potato pie, and I said the meal was wonderful, and I hugged everyone goodbye. On the drive home, I kept my coat on. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed something to hold me together. I have thought about that evening for a long time now, and one of the things I keep coming back to is that it didn't begin on Thanksgiving. That was just the day I finally heard it said out loud. I am 68 years old. I worked for 32 years as a school librarian in the same district, the same building for 20 of those years, before they consolidated and moved everyone around. I raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband left when Renata was 11 and Daniel was 8. I drove them to every school play, every orthodontist appointment, every cross-country meet and band concert and college visit. I co-signed on Daniel's first car loan, I flew out to Portland when Renata was in labor because Scott's mother had a health scare and couldn't make it, and I stayed for 3 weeks, and I did the laundry and the dishes, and I held the baby at 2 in the morning so they could sleep. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound noble. I'm telling you because I need you to understand who I was in that family, what role I played, what I had spent a lifetime being. Useful, reliable, the person who showed up. And somewhere along the way, without my noticing, I had become an inconvenience. After Thanksgiving, I didn't call Renata for 11 days. She didn't call me either, which told me something. When she finally did call, she was breezy, normal, asking if I'd eaten the leftover pie. I said yes. She said good. We talked about my granddaughter's college applications. Everything was ordinary. Everything was fine. I did not tell her what I had heard. I want to be clear. I thought about it. I drafted the conversation in my head a dozen times on my walks in the morning. I imagined saying, "Renata, I need to talk to you about something." I imagined her face going still. But every time I got to the next part, the part where I actually said the words, I couldn't picture an outcome that ended in anything other than her defending herself, me apologizing for making her feel bad, and both of us pretending it never happened. I had done that too many times in my life. I was done doing it. Instead, I started paying attention. This was not something I had done before, not deliberately. I had always taken things at face value, assumed the best, filled in the silences with whatever explanation made everyone look kind. It was something I had learned to do early, married to a man who needed things smoothed over, who needed me to believe the story he told rather than the one I was watching happen. Old habits. But now I started noticing. I noticed that when Renata called, she called on Sunday evenings, always when she was in the car driving somewhere, so the conversation had a natural end. I noticed that she hadn't visited my house in 8 months, not since last Easter, when she'd stayed for exactly 90 minutes and said they had another stop to make. I noticed that my granddaughter, who I adored and who I believed adored me, had stopped texting me around the time she started driving herself places. Not stopped completely, just tapered. The way things taper when they're no longer a habit. I noticed that I had not been asked my opinion about anything in this family for a very long time. Not about Daniel's job change. Not about the renovation Renata and Scott had started on the house. Not about my granddaughter's college list. I thought about all of this on my morning walks. I live in a neighborhood of older bungalows in Pasadena, and the streets are wide and tree-lined, and in November the light comes in low and gold, and it is genuinely beautiful if you were in the right frame of mind. I was not always in the right frame of mind, but I walked anyway. And then one Tuesday morning in early December, I came home from my walk, put on a pot of coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table with the folder I kept in the drawer under the silverware tray. The folder had my financial paperwork in it. Not all of it, just the summary sheet my accountant had given me the previous spring, the one with the overview of my assets. I am not wealthy. I want to be accurate about this. I have my pension from the school district, which after 32 years comes to a comfortable but not lavish monthly amount. I have Social Security, which I started drawing at 67. I have a savings account, and I have the house, which I've owned outright since I paid off the mortgage 6 years ago. The house. That was the thing I had been circling without wanting to look directly at. The house was where my mother had died, in the back bedroom, in her own bed, the way she wanted. It was where I'd raised Renata and Daniel, where the Christmas ornaments still had the kids' names on them in my handwriting, where the height measurements were still penciled on the doorframe in the hallway. It was worth, and this was the number my accountant had shown me, based on comparable sales in the neighborhood, just under $700,000. I sat with that number for a while. Then I thought about something Scott had said to me the previous summer, at a family barbecue, the kind of throwaway thing people say. He had said, "You know, Mom, a place that size is a lot of upkeep for one person." He'd said it pleasantly, smiling. I had smiled back. I had said something like, "Oh, I managed just fine," and we had both moved on. But I thought about it now with different ears. And then I called my friend Helen. Helen and I have known each other for 26 years. We taught in the same building for 15 of those years. She was an English teacher, And we became friends the way you do when you spend enough years eating lunch across from someone. Slowly, and then all at once. She is 71, sharp as she has ever been. And she is the kind of person who says the thing no one else will say, without cruelty, just because she believes in telling the truth. Something happened at Thanksgiving, I said. I need to tell you. I told her everything. I told her what I had heard Renata say about me sitting there, about Scott wanting to invite me only to the evening portion next time, about the coat on the drive home, about the folder with the financial papers. Helen listened. She didn't interrupt. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" she said. "Not what should you do. What do you want to do?" I realized I had been waiting for someone to ask me that question for a very long time. "I want to stop arranging my life around people who find me inconvenient," I said. "Okay," she said. "So let's talk about what that looks like." Helen had a 2-bedroom condominium in a 55-plus community in Arcadia that she had been renting out for 4 years. The tenant was leaving in January. She had been planning to list it, but hadn't yet. "I want to be careful," I told her. "I don't want to do anything rash." "This isn't rash," she said. "You've been thinking about this for 30 years. You just didn't have a reason to act on it until now." I made an appointment with my attorney the following week. His name is Gerald, not related to anyone in my family, just a man who had handled my will and my mother's estate and various small legal matters over the years. I sat across from him in his office on Lake Avenue, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to sell the house. I wanted to update my will, and I wanted to do both of these things before Christmas. Gerald looked at me over his glasses the way he does when he is deciding whether to talk someone out of something. Then he looked back at the papers in front of him. "This is entirely within your rights," he said, "and your assets, your decisions. I'll need a few weeks to do this correctly." "I have a few weeks," I said. We drew up the new documents over 3 appointments in December. I was calm the whole time, calmer than I expected to be. I was not angry, not exactly. Anger had a heat to it that I didn't feel. What I felt was something closer to clarity. The kind you get when you have been looking at something sideways for a long time and you finally turn to face it straight on. I was not disinheriting my children. I want to say that clearly. I was not trying to punish anyone. I was reorganizing my life around a truth I had been refusing to look at, which was that I had spent decades making myself smaller so that other people would find me easier to be around, and that it hadn't worked, and that it was time to stop. The house sold faster than Gerald expected. I had listed it quietly through an agent he recommended, and by the second week of December there was an offer. A young family, 2 kids, they loved the yard. I accepted. I did not tell Renata or Daniel that I was selling the house. Not yet. I told my granddaughter. This felt important to me. She was the one who had called me Grandma and meant it, who had asked to learn how to make sweet potato pie the summer she was 14, who had once driven 40 minutes on her own just to bring me flowers on my birthday. I didn't want her to find out secondhand. I called her on a Thursday evening and I asked how the college applications were going, and she told me about her top choices. And after a while I said, "I want to tell you something. I'm selling the house and moving to a new place. Something smaller and easier." There was a pause. "Where?" she said. "In Arcadia. Near Helen." Another pause. "Are you okay, Grandma?" "I am," I said. "I'm better than I've been in a while, actually." She asked if she could come see the house one more time before I moved. I said of course. She came that Saturday and I made hot chocolate and we sat at the kitchen table and she took a few photos on her phone. She didn't ask me why. She was 17 and she was wiser than she knew, because she could feel that there was a reason and that it was mine to keep. When she left, she hugged me for a long time. Christmas was on a Wednesday that year. On the Monday before, I drove to Renata's house in Glendale with 2 envelopes on the passenger seat. The first was a card. Inside the card was a check. A meaningful amount, not enormous, but the kind of money that matters. It was for my granddaughter, marked clearly for her college fund. The second envelope was a letter, 2 pages, handwritten, because I wanted them to know I had chosen every word. I had rewritten it 4 times. I was not unkind in the letter. I did not describe what I had overheard. I simply told them some things that were true. I told them I was selling the house and moving to a smaller place, and that the closing would be in February. I told them my will had been updated with the help of my attorney, and that if they had questions, they could contact him. I told them I had decided to spend the holidays differently this year and going forward, that I had made plans I was looking forward to, and that I hoped they had a wonderful Christmas. I told them I loved them. I meant that too. Renata came to the door when I rang. She looked surprised to see me. I hadn't told her I was coming. I handed her the card and said it was for her daughter. I handed her the letter and said this was for her and Scott and Daniel to read together. She looked at the envelope. "Mom, what is this?" "Just a letter," I said. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I hugged her. I got back in my car. I drove home. She called that evening. She called 13 minutes, and I let it go to voicemail. Scott called once. Daniel called the next morning. I let those go too. I was not being cruel. I was just finally allowing myself the same thing they had given themselves without a second thought all along, the freedom to be unavailable. I listened to all the voicemails a few days later. Renata's first message was confused, a little hurt. Her second was sharper. Her third was softer again. Daniel's was brief, which was typical, but at the end he said, "I hope you're okay, Mom," and his voice had something in it I hadn't heard in a long time. I didn't call them back that week. I spent Christmas with Helen. She lives in the condo she's been in for 3 years now, and she had strung white lights along the balcony and made a standing rib roast and invited 2 other women we both know from the Library Association, and we sat around her table with good wine and the roast and a pecan pie I had made, and we talked until it was past 11. We talked about books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, things that had surprised us, things that still could. At some point, Helen made decaf, and we sat with our mugs in the lights from the city below, and I thought, this is what chosen family looks like. It was the best Christmas I had had in years, maybe the best in a decade. I called Renata on New Year's Day. I was ready by then. We talked for almost an hour, the longest real conversation we had had since I couldn't remember when. I told her a little of what I had been feeling. Not everything, not what I had overheard, but enough. I told her I had realized I'd been waiting around for things that weren't coming, and that I had decided to stop waiting. She cried a little, not dramatically, just quietly, the way she used to cry when she was small and she didn't want me to see. I told her I wasn't going anywhere, that I still loved her and I still wanted to be her mother, but that it was going to look a little different now, that I had needs and a life of my own and I was going to live it. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said. "I know," I said. "That's partly my fault. I should have said it a long time ago. I moved into the condo in February. Helen helped me carry boxes. It's smaller than the house, much smaller, but the windows face east, and the light in the morning is extraordinary. And there is a walking trail nearby where I go every day, and in the spring the jacarandas bloom, and they drop purple flowers all along the path. I got a call from my granddaughter in March. She'd been accepted to her first choice school. She called me before she called either of her parents. She told me this later, and maybe she was being diplomatic, but I chose to believe it was true. I was the first person she told. I said, "I am so proud of you." "Go celebrate," she said. "I love you, Grandma." I said, "I love you too." And I sat for a while after we hung up, in my chair by the east-facing window, with the morning light coming in. And I thought about what it costs to wait for other people to make room for you, and what it feels like to finally stop waiting, and how strange it is that the bravest thing I ever did at 68 years old was simply to start taking up space. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since that Thanksgiving, not in any grand, cosmic way, just in the quiet, practical way you think about things when you're 68 and you finally have enough distance to see your own life clearly. Here's what I know. The way people treat you is rarely an accident. It builds over time, shaped by what you allowed, what you excused, what you kept smoothing over, because the alternative felt too hard. I am not saying I deserve to be talked about in my own daughter's sunroom like an inconvenience to be managed. I am saying I had spent decades teaching the people around me that I would absorb almost anything without complaint, and they had learned that lesson very well. That is the part that stings the most, if I'm honest. Not what Renata said, not Scott's little suggestion about inviting me only to the evening portion. It was the recognition that I had, in some ways, made it easy for them to forget that I had needs of my own. I had been so focused on being useful, on showing up, on not being a burden, that I had slowly made myself into a background figure in my own family's life. And background figures don't get consulted. They don't get considered. They get managed. What I did after that night was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. Selling the house, updating my will, spending Christmas with Helen, none of it was designed to punish anyone. It was designed to stop a pattern. Because the thing about patterns is that they only change when someone decides to change them. And no one in my family had any reason to change this one. It was working fine for them. It was only costing me. Renata is a good person. I believe that. Daniel too. But good people can still take someone for granted if that someone has never asked for more. That is not a character flaw so much as a failure of attention, and attention, I have learned, follows what it is trained to follow. I had trained my family to overlook me. It took 68 years, and a conversation I was never meant to hear for me to understand that I was the only one who could retrain them. What I want to say to anyone listening is this. There is a particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with confrontation. It is the courage to simply stop. Stop waiting. Stop making yourself smaller. Stop filling the silences with excuses for other people. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It looks from the outside like a woman quietly selling her house and spending Christmas with her best friend. But inside, it feels like standing up straight for the first time in years. My granddaughter called me first when she got her acceptance letter. I think about that often. I think it happened because somewhere in all of this, she had seen something in me shift, and she moved toward it. Young people notice more than we give them credit for. They are watching us, always, learning what it looks like to be a grown person in the world. And I decided, better late than never, to show her what it looks like when a woman chooses herself. Not selfishly, not at everyone else's expense, just finally, honestly, without apology. That is the only lesson I have. It came slowly, and it cost something, but it was mine.